Hey, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm just going to look at you very quickly, you beautiful faces. If you wouldn't mind muting your computer. And just to remind you, we will have some time at the end of this time together for some questions if you have them for Cindy. Cindy, it is wonderful to see you. I was talking to my former boss, Michael Palgon, this morning, and he said, "Oh, Cindy's brilliant." So I'm so glad you are here. Your name has been in the publishing world since the 2000s, or maybe earlier. Welcome, Cindy. And I wonder if you just shared to kick off, what has the road been like for you to get to into publishing?
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here and to talk about myself. So I my road to publishing was a little different from the usual route. I After college, I always knew that I wanted to work with books, that this was the thing that that the one thing that I could actually do. I studied English in college, and from college, I went to work in the college department of Random House as an assistant. And I worked for 16 editors, and I had a training program. I was trained to copy edit and to proofread and to learn. It was more on the production editing side. And I learned how a book was made with complicated photographs. There were textbooks and complicated art and whatever. So it was a real education that most editors don't get anymore about the
Mm.
process. So at the same time, I got a little bit bored of working on textbooks. I was very shy. I didn't feel that I could go to work in trade publishing. Like, it just felt like it was beyond me, in terms of talking to agents and writers. And I'm from New York. I grew up in Manhattan. I actually live I'm in our offices, which is in the same building that I grew up in which I live in which Julie Grau lives in, which is crazy.
Wow.
And I really didn't move very far, but I was tired. I felt like I needed to get away from New York, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so the only thing I felt was that I wanted to read more. And I had studied Russian. I was like losing it. So I applied for a PhD program in comparative literature at Berkeley. And I went there, and I never really wanted to be a professor, but I just wanted that time to read. And I spent 4 years there just reading and I mean, it was an amazing 4 years. But then I turned 29, and I thought, what am I doing? I didn't want to be a professor. I don't think I would have been very good at it. And I really felt I needed a real job, and it was time to go back to New York. So I moved back to New York. I have an MA that I picked up along the way, but I did not get the PhD. And I was now felt that I was ready to work in trade publishing. I had read a lot and I had thought a lot about books, and I felt more confident. And um, the problem was no one wanted to hire me because I was 29, and everybody told me I was too old. And someone laughed at me because I had studied Latin. It was just very not easy. And I ended up doing a lot of odd jobs. I read for agents. I just started meeting people and did whatever anyone offered me. I did a lot of temporary jobs working for mostly agents. And then I got a job for a crazy publisher named Donald I. Fine, who did very commercial books, not at all what I was interested in, but it was the job that I got. And he was so nuts that at some point we all knew that I just couldn't stay there. And he had some kind of outburst and crazy fit one day. And in the elevator, it was raining outside, and I was talking to the guy in the elevator. Was very nice. He'd come to deliver a check. And he said, "Do you work for him?" And I said, "Well, I think, until the end of the week, like, I'm not going to work for him." And we ended up walking. He had an umbrella, and it was raining outside, and he worked for an agent. And he said to me, "My girlfriend works at Tickner and Fields, which was an imprint of Houghton Mifflin. Her boss is leaving. There's a new guy coming. He'll need an assistant." And I got that job. So I worked at Tickner and Fields. I started in a very tiny, I've always worked at very small places. So Tickner and Fields was an imprint of already small Houghton Mifflin.
Yeah.
And there were just four of us, I think, or sometimes there were five of us. And I started editing right away. It was very quick. In 6 months, he promoted me. And I acquired the first book I acquired became a New York Times bestseller is Dakota, a spiritual geography by Kathleen Norris.
Mm.
It didn't become a bestseller till paperback when I had already left. But um, anyway, I now was married and I was pregnant. I the the Friday that I came back from maternity leave, they closed down Tickner and Fields. So I lost my job. And I was really worried that I was just starting and I felt, why would I ever, how will I ever get a job and a career? And it turned out, so it suddenly, like lots of doors opened for me. I was offered a job at Algonquin, which I thought I was going to go to. And then there was this other weird job that I was offered that was either for a new place. So Putnam, which was a very successful commercial small publisher, um, wanted to grow. And this is the beginning of the time when growth became, people were thinking about how do you grow publishing. And
Yes.
um, so Putnam was really great at really successful, suspense and thrillers like Tom Clancy. But Phyllis Gran, who is the brilliant CEO, wanted to expand it into other areas of the bookstore. So Putnam was trying to buy Morrow, and they had hired a visionary publisher named Susan Peterson to either run Morrow if they bought it, or if the deal didn't go through, she would start a new upmarket house that did fiction, upmarket fiction and nonfiction within Putnam. And that became Riverhead. So I actually was told, I
Mm.
went to a lunch where I was going to take the Algonquin job. And an agent brought me to a lunch with a lot of older publishing people. And I just somehow they started talking about Susan Peterson, and I mentioned that I had a job offer, but that I was going to Algonquin, and they started yelling at me that I had to go work for Susan because she was such an amazing publisher. And I got back to my office, and that agent who had invited me to the luncheon called me and said the deal with Morrow went through. And I knew I didn't want to work at Morrow. I didn't want to work with best-selling authors and handling them. That wasn't why I was getting into publishing. And so I called Susan to tell her that I wasn't coming and that I was taking the Algonquin job. And I don't know, I just said, congratulations. And she said, why are you coming? And I said, no, I heard the Morrow deal went through. And she said, no, the Morrow deal fell through. Are you coming? And I couldn't think of a reason not to come anymore. Like my whole narrative was gone. And I just said yes on the phone. And I had those women's voices in my ears. So that's how I got to Riverhead.
Wow, and so fascinating, which is so much of the story when you talk to people in the publishing industry. So in 2005, we have the first iteration of Spiegel and Grau. You and Julie launch this imprint. What was it like to get it off the ground, still keeping your idea of smallness and working with the likes of Peter Olson?
Right. Well, I didn't really work with Peter Elson, but he was the CEO. So we had an amazing run at Riverhead, and we discovered so many like truly incredible authors who are still having huge careers today.
Mm,
And we didn't plan on leaving, but Julie and I were both offered separately different jobs, and someone offered me an imprint. And I already had an imprint, but I was worried that Julie might leave. And then I said to him, you know, I already have an imprint and I don't want to leave, but something's happening with Julie. And I don't know. The thing is, I just don't want to leave Julie. And he said, oh my God, that would be amazing if the two of you could come together. And it had never occurred to me or to us that we could leave together and start something new. And it was kind of a light bulb going off. We also didn't have contracts at the time at Penguin, which was sort of part of the whole problem. So now by now, Putnam was acquired by Penguin, right? So we were
mm.
part of Penguin Putnam, it was called. And so we had gone to see a lawyer, and we told the lawyer about all the options, that these were we were getting um, interest in other ways. And he said, you should meet with another editor, one of these publishers, just so that you have a strong position from which to negotiate your contract at Penguin. And there were things going on at Penguin that the whole process was not pleasant with Penguin, and we ended up kind of to our surprise leaving. We felt we had to leave by the end of that process. It just was very unpleasant, and so we went to work for Steve Rubin, who in part of the Doubleday group, and Steve, I guess, had figured this out with Peter Olson. One of the things that was so brilliant, we just saw our lawyer Bob Levine, who is retired. We went to another retirement party. The lawyer who succeeded him, and Bob was there, and we were kind of rehashing this moment. And he said to us, I was shocked that Peter Elson agreed to give you an imprint with both of your names on it, because what that meant was that we could take our names when we left, which we didn't realize. And our lawyer was taking a long time negotiating that point. And we just wanted to sign the contracts. We're like, it's okay. We're never going to leave and start our own house and take the name with us. Like, it seemed so preposterous to us. And it was such a stroke of genius that he did that, because the name, when we did finally leave, was valuable. It was worth something. It's a name that was known in the industry. And we were starting not from scratch anymore, but we were starting with the brand.
Yeah, and very respected, Cindy. So in 2020, the year of a pandemic, you launched Spiegel and Grau.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And your first book was Fox and I, An
Yeah.
Uncommon Friendship. Talk to us about that. That was a gutsy move, and even the first book that you come out with was remarkable. Share a little bit about that journey.
Sure. So we were fired from Random House at a time of kind of a reorganization. And it was our most profitable year ever on right after the two previous years were the most profitable ever also.
Hmm.
And we were told that in the new organization, we just didn't fit into any lane, that we were not category publishers. And so because publishing has gotten so large and there's so many imprints, they were trying to divide them up by category. At one point, our boss came to me and said, "You're women, you can do women's books," which I feel like it was unbelievable. And I think illegal, but I don't know. Anyway, so we when it happened, it was becoming harder and harder to publish there. It was
Mhm.
such a large company, and we didn't have, it's very easy, it's easier to publish books by category, right? You put them on the track and they just go, you do the same thing for those books and you know what they are. But our books always kind of defied category, and they just took more effort and more attention. And there was a wall that had gone up between sales and editorial. When I was a young editor at Riverhead, I could just call the head of sales and say, "Oh, I want this many books." And he would say, "Well, how about this?" And we'd come to some agreement. I couldn't even call the head of sales. I couldn't even call a sales rep when I was a publisher at Random House when we left. So we knew, like both of us looked at each other at that moment, and we knew we could never work for another corporation again, because we had put so much effort and work into building what became Spiegel and Grau, and the thought that they could take it away from us when it was successful, then we had done it successfully, was was really upsetting. And we couldn't do that again, right? We couldn't spend years building something else that someone could just take away from us. And actually, the day that it was announced in the New York Times that they were closing us down, someone I had met at a lunch called me. My phone rang. I picked it up. He said, "How much do you need?" And in that moment, and I had even thought it in myself that we could do this on our own. And he did not become one of our investors, but we spent that year that we had they we were paid out for a year, and We did talk to other publishers. We got called by everyone, and we went to the place that was we were told was the happiest place. And we talked to them and we said, well, how does it work with sales? And they said, oh, don't worry about sales. Your associate publisher will take care of that. And we were like, that's like just like Random House. That's where we came from, you know. So we spent a year writing this document of what we thought a publishing house could look like. And it was very long. And we thought, okay, it's not 1850 anymore. What does it mean to publish? And it seemed to not be, why would we limit it to books? So we thought we'll be sort of multimedia. We'll do podcasts. We'll have film. We do have a film person inside the house. We thought about what when you publish a project, you want to do it in a holistic way, and you want to look at it at the beginning and think, well, how would we do this as a film? When would we do it? How would it be? What part is a book? Is there a graphic novel in here? And we wanted to be able to control that whole process of thinking about the publication and how that message gets out into the world. And a lot of our books had become films and had become other formats. So we just wanted more agency, and we wanted more, because as an editor, you're shaping the message, you're shaping the story, right? You have a very, not always, but often you have a strong hand in what that story becomes. And then you have no part of where that story goes, right? Then it's the authors, but you actually were part of that process. So we wrote this very long document. I gave it to a friend who has a lot of money, and he said, "No, it's very well written." And we realized it was not a business plan. We hired someone, and we actually spent that year raising money, and we have amazing investors. But during that year, I had also opened a Pilates studio in down the hall because I had been working so hard. Been spending all my free time was just running to Pilates and PT, and I had no time for myself. And I thought, well, maybe this space was opening up in my building, and I thought, well, maybe I could just bring everyone to me and just save myself some time. And so I was working out there with an agent who had come, and she told me about a writers conference in New Orleans that she couldn't come to, and she asked if I wanted to take her place. And I had no job, and I didn't know if they would want me, but they invited me. So I went to New Orleans, and I said to everybody, you know, there's like I have nothing to give you, but you can ask me anything. I'll just tell you what I think. And there was this writer there that I knew was the star, you know, and it was Catherine Raven who wrote Fox and I. And people kept bringing her to me. She was one of the people whose pages I had. I had a little sample of her pages. I had a meeting with her, but I really hadn't told anyone that we were doing this. And it seemed a little premature. Like I had nothing to offer her. And on the very last day of the conference, we actually exited our hotel rooms at the very same moment, and we were catty-corner to each other, which we didn't know. And she was clutching this manuscript, and she said, "Would you like to read the whole thing?" And I knew I was doing this. You know, I didn't know what she was thinking I would do with it, but I said, "Sure." I took it. I went home and I read it, and I called her and I said, "You know, we're trying to create this new house." And I would like to propose that you and I will edit it with you. And in the spring, I'll know if it needed editing. We'll know if we're doing this or not. And if we are, we'll publish you. You'll be the first book we publish. And if not, I can help you get an agent. You'll have an edited manuscript. And she said, that's what I was hoping you'd say. So we didn't talk about money. We didn't for a year. And then it took longer than the year because it took longer than the spring because we had some snafus with the investors, and someone we thought we ended up not wanting the money from one of the investors, and we had to get it again. Anyway, that's that story, and and that's why our logo is a fox, is in the middle, the little red fox, because she's our origin story. And the other thing is, you're right on. It was COVID, right? Suddenly, COVID was happening, and as I was reading her book about a solitary woman who had a friendship with a wild fox, and who ended up being killed in a wildfire, um, that it just felt like so of the moment, because we were
Yes.
now all solitary people. And I was spending COVID in a house that I have on Long Island in the woods. And again, our relationship to nature felt different from what it had been before. And there were wildfires in California. And for me, it just felt very obvious that this was going to be a book that everyone needed to read. And at the same time, I knew that if I had been at Random House, no one would have seen that as a big book because it's so quiet. And that was, in a way, the test case for our vision of this new house, which would be that we would be small. We would never be more than 15 to 20 books a year. And we'd put that author editor relationship back at the center of the equation. And so, that it would be the passion of the editor that would be driving and the vision that would be driving this sales, not the sales team deciding what was easiest to sell. And so it worked, and we did get a lot of attention because it was our first year. We talked to a lot of people that first year. I was very excited about the book, and the book is amazing. So that's the story of Fox and I.
And one of the statements that is attributed to you is a line that is beautiful for writers. It's not about us, it's about the books. And when you look at Spiegel and Grau, there's such, you talk about the categories that, Random House puts editors in. What's the acquisition process with you and Julie? How do you share in or do you run up and down the hall because you're in the same building and say, this is it, this is it? How does that all happen?
Okay, well, we actually have an office, which I am in. It has a few books. The bookshelves are in the other, this is the back room. But so I've always been at a small house, and I've never had to go to an acquisition meeting in my entire career, and which I think is in a way the secret of our success. Because what I find about what I hear, I mean, I think I once sat in on an acquisitions meeting at Random House, but what that is it's publishing by consensus, right? You're in a room and you pitch your book, and then other editors say, "Oh, I didn't like it for this reason." They're actually some of them feel competitive with you, so they don't want you to get the book. And everybody has their opinion. And if everybody loves it, then you can buy the book. And if more people don't like it, you can't buy the book or, whatever. I mean, it's not you hear the voices of a lot of other people. And for some reason, and I've thought about this a lot, why, I feel like I do have a good knack for finding books that resonate with readers, and they're not always the obvious books. And luckily, no one has ever stopped me from acquiring anything because, at Riverhead, Susan, I did work for a visionary publisher who really supported me and helped me grow in terms of my confidence a lot and vision. And then, Julie and I became the publishers of Riverhead, so we didn't have to go to we'd have to go to people for money sometimes, if it was over a certain amount, or at Random House we had to. But um, so, but Julie and I have worked together for 32 years, which is crazy. And we know what we generally share. We share a lot of the same vision. We actually mostly agree on things. And then there's some areas that we don't really agree, right? That there are books that I don't like that she likes, and there are books that I love. And we generally let each other do those books, right? And with our editors, they just have to find one of us who has that vision for publishing. Like Julie's good at music books, like at popular music books, and I really don't know anything about it. And there's no point in my giving an opinion, right? So she handles something like that, and there are other things that I like that, she and I mean it's just very amicable and sometimes and very informal. We do now have a meeting. We have a once a week we have an editorial meeting, and it mostly is because during COVID it was very hard. Everybody was in different places, and so it felt like we needed to be together once a week to talk about what we were reading with our editors.
Mhm.
But the other editor, and also if Julie and I really don't like something or don't get something, but everybody else likes it, like that's fine too. We just need someone to be driving it and someone to have a vision who can articulate that vision. It's not just that they like it, right? A lot of editors come and say, well, I really love this. but you have to express why, what it is about it that you think is going to connect with other readers. And that's one of the things that interests me most about this job is that I feel like I'm on the cutting edge, like I'm a year ahead of you guys in terms of what people are writing. Like I see things before you do, and trying to figure out where the culture is and where it's going in that year when we will be publishing those books, and trying to anticipate what we need to read. Like what is it that I want to read? What is it, and I feel like I'm just like everybody else. Like if I, you know, I have this very literary background and I'm a really good editor. But at the base of it is what is it? What connects with me is going to connect with someone else too. If I feel so passionately about it, I can't imagine I'm the only one in the world who's going to, feel that way. So that's the process.
So interesting. I was sharing with someone recently. I've been in publishing for over 35 years now, and I was kind of forlorn, saddened, explaining to them when I worked at Doubleday, actually with Steve Rubin as my boss. I could get on a plane, go hear someone, come back, tell everyone about it, have no P&L, no proposal, and just say, "What do you think?" And then someone would say, "Go offer him a two-book deal." And now we have P&Ls and how many social media people do you have following you, all that kind of stuff. Can you look into are you bullish about the future of publishing when you know what we used to do and what today's, you've got AI thrown in the mix. What are your crystal ball thoughts, if you will? And
Okay, well,
while she's asking this question, if you have a question, we have a little bit of time left here today. Um, Go into the chat and let me know you have a question, and we'll try to get that answered by Cindy. Go ahead, Cindy.
uh, sure. Well, I feel like I have to be bullish because I started this company. We're 5 years old, right? We're only five, and this is a very important year for us because we're publishing Catherine Stockett's first
Mm.
novel since The Help, called The Calamity Club, and it's spectacular, and it's an amazing opportunity for us. And we have other amazing books. So The Fire Agent by David Berwald, who it's an amazing historical novel about the rise of fascism in Japan and Germany. It's incredible. It reminds me of it, like reading, um, I don't know, it was like an old-fashioned, like Mishner or something like that. I can't even think of anyone, but James Clavell, it's a spy story based on the life of his grandfather. We have really good books coming up. But I guess everything changes all the time, right? And this is a very different model for me. I've had to learn a lot because our margins are smaller than they were if you're at a big house where printing is cheaper and everything is cheaper, distribution is cheaper. Um, so I pay a lot of attention to the numbers, and I have a limited amount of money, right? I don't have that endless Bertelsmann funds. We have to self-support ourselves. Um, so I won't buy a book if I don't think it's going to really sell. And you make mistakes, but actually we've had a pretty good track record lately. It's been amazing, actually. I'll say we've had New York Times bestsellers, we've had 9 Indie Next books. It's just been like everything that we hoped it would be. And what I think is this notion. So there are two things. One is what the books are, and the other thing is how do you publish them. And I do think that, when I was at Riverhead, I published a lot of books about identity. And it seemed like that was something that people really needed to talk about. A lot of people young people were coming of age, immigrants whose stories hadn't been told, like Chang Rae Lee, Gary Steingart, Khaled Hosseini, James, I published The Color of Water, James McBride, again, that generation was coming of age. Like there hadn't been people to tell those stories before. When we left and went to Random House, it was a different time. The economy had collapsed. Then there was 9/11. It felt like a more serious time, and we published a lot of books into the in 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 the more like criminal justice, social justice realm. Like we did Orange is the New Black, Just Mercy, between the world and me. It felt like a time of more serious, Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. It felt like a time of more serious books about the world. And we did less fiction then. When
Mm.
I came starting here, also again, we're doing a lot of natural history books. We did Margaret Rankel's The Comfort of Crows. Go as River is a novel. Our book, Culpability, the Oprah pick, is about AI. So I feel like that if you keep thinking about what we need, the world is going to continue to change and people will keep wanting to read. And I do think that if you just have to be attuned to the moment. And that's really fun for me. I think a lot of publishers don't think that. Like if you're thinking in categories, you're never thinking that way, right? You're just thinking
Mhm.
what worked yesterday. So you're looking backwards. But I want to look forward. And if you I'm really proud that everyone now sees natural history, natural world as a category. And that didn't exist before Fox and I. I will just say that everyone talks about hair, the book hair, but that they compare it to Fox and I. And so I do think that that is a really important thing to keep thinking, what do we need now? What is new? What haven't we heard before? Because I don't believe that people want to read the same story over and over and over again. So that's one thing. On the other side is how do you publish these books when the Washington Post, book world just got shut down, when there's so few places to actually review books. And we
Mhm.
have some serious books coming out that we need places to review them. How do we get the attention? And, the influencer world, we do sometimes, we're trying everything. We're on social media. I hope that you'll all sign up for our newsletter, go on our website and sign up for our newsletter. I have to say that. And we're always thinking about how do you spread the word. So books really do spread through word of mouth. That's not going to change. And so how do you start that word of mouth? How do you get it into enough people's hands where the word of mouth becomes organic? Because the key to having a successful, healthy business is to have a healthy backlist. And we need to build that backlist so that when we buy our books, we're not, other people could be thinking of books for the moment. We do think of, if an opportunity came to us, we wouldn't turn it down. But we're thinking about the books that will last. And so one of the parts of our model that's different from a big house's model is that we don't put our resources behind a book just for the first 3 weeks after publication. We're continuing to spend money to promote books like Fox and I, which was our very first book. We're still promoting them.
Mm.
And I think that that's key also for a small house. So I do feel it's challenging. The one thing that, we keep hearing and it's comforting is that the number of books sold every year really hasn't changed for the past like decades. And so, if the format changes, that's fine. If you want to read an audiobook, listen to an audiobook, you want to read an ebook, that's totally fine. I think, technology will change. I think I don't feel so threatened by it. I feel that, if AI can write an amazing book, that's great. But if you can write an amazing book, that's great too. Like someone will want to read your book just as much. You always have competition. Like it's not easy to be a writer. Nobody is just because you are human doesn't mean that people want to read your book. So I just feel that we all have to, take it one step at a time. And I think AI is threatening for many other reasons, but I'm just not sure that I think if it can provide books that are actually deeply meaningful, I'm open to looking at them. You know what I mean? But I think that there is something about being human that can't be replicated, I believe, and what we do will always be of interest to us, I hope.
Yeah. Jeannie Rose from DC. Go ahead with your question, Jeannie.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, your own perseverance is really remarkable and really encouraging, as all of us are, seeking to persevere in our work. You maybe like indirectly answered what I was going to ask, but I actually would love to hear if you would be interested in giving a really explicit answer to this question. You talked about how, categories and how categories was kind of the easier way. It's like you can sell it. It's like the thing that people understand. So the sort of like dumb question on the other side of that is, well, then why do the like non-category work? What's the point? And I think there is a point, and you talked about it a little bit. But for so many of us who write sort of non-category work, would just love to hear anything you have to say about that.
Sure. I think that's a really good question, actually, because I just want to be clear that I'm happy for people to publish in categories. I think, genre books have their place and I think they're fun and some are better than fun. I'm not trying to criticize them. And I think that way of publishing comes from um, just from the sheer size of the companies and what they're able to do. But for me, I really am looking. But that's not why I'm in publishing. And it's very personal, right? Because I could be spending my life doing many, many things. And I have other things I want to do in my life too, that I still keep thinking like I have to live for a really long time. But I, you know, I feel that I have a gift, which is I my gift seems to be that I have a talent for sharing stories and sharing meaning, like just, locating it and then disseminating it. And that's what interests me. When I came into this business with all those years of studying literature, and I published amazing books, and Harold Bloom was my mentor. I published 4 or 5 of his books, and I'm very close to him. I mean, the literary world is very dear to my heart, and I thought that was why I wanted to be an editor, just to be literary. At some point, I realized that, first of all, it's not really fun unless people are reading the books that you're working on. So it's much more fun if they are successful, right? Because you're actually making a difference. And then I realized the books that I was publishing were actually changing the cultural conversation, that there were books that really actually were changing the world. And that is super exciting. And I realize what a privileged position that we editors are in. And so if I can do that and yet waste my time publishing books that don't change the world, like what am I doing? Like what I don't want to do that. And so this is just me, personally feeling that I want to give back, I want to help move the culture forward. And I'm interested in that. And I'm interested in messages and stories that we need and what will make us more human and how do we find meaning? How do we move forward in these difficult times from here and where do we go? And so that's my answer. But other people have their own answers. I'm not trying to say there's only one way to do this. And I love that there are many other houses coming up doing it differently and trying new things.
We've got Erica Ferguson joining us from New Mexico. Go ahead, Erica, with your question.
Sure. Cindy, thanks so much for your authenticity. I truly appreciate that vulnerability and transparency in your story. My question actually piggybacks on a statement you just made, and it's really around what makes a book truly breakthrough. And maybe you can share a little bit more about, from your experience, what separates books that are merely well written from books that actually move culture, meaning they change how people think, talk, or act. And what do you look for in a voice or perspective that suggests that level of impact is possible?
So that is the question. That's the crux of it, right? And I think that it's partly a mystery to me, and that's part of the like great. I mean, it's incredible, right? And I what's also a mystery is, which has always been is like shocking to me, is how is it that, for example, Chang-Rae Lee's Native Speaker was the first novel that I saw when I was at Random House, at Riverhead, starting Riverhead. It was the first novel that the first submission that actually landed on my desk, and my desk was empty, and I just sat down, I read it, and I thought, this is crazy. Like this seems like a classic, and yet I've never read anything like it. I looked, there was no Korean American had ever written a novel since 1960 with a guy named Richard Park. Like I couldn't find anything, right? And I thought it was so exciting. And then I've always wondered, how is it that the first person who writes this is brilliant, right? Like, how is it that the first person who writes, how James McBride writes this biracial memoir, and he's brilliant. And it's the first time I've ever heard that story. And I don't know, it's like a mystery to me. I just think that you like there is something I feel that is a little bit I don't know if the word is spiritual or something that something otherworldly that I feel that I am not doing this by myself. I don't know how the books come to me. I feel that it's magical often, that I get the right books at the right moment. It doesn't always work out, of course, but I just try to trust that I'm going to get what we need. And but again, it's very mysterious. And that's part of the great fun of it, right? Like, I see you're a reverend, so
Yeah, you said three words that I think are powerful that I use often is mystery, magical, and leaning into all of the unknown, how they come to you. So trust.
yeah.
Those are really three powerful words.
And that's the same with my editing process. Like, I don't know how it works. I know what I'm doing. I take a pencil and suddenly I'm in a zone and I see what the book can be. And if I
Right.
don't see that, I don't necessarily want to publish the book. Like the books that I feel that I can be, like anyone could do it, right? But if there are books that I have some vision for, then I want to do that book. And it's like I don't even question what I'm doing because it just feels like it comes to me. I don't know. I don't know.
Something's moving through you.
Yeah.
For you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Kyle Castro from Nashville, jump in. We have time for your one question. Sorry we're running out of time, but Cindy, we could probably go to lunch and have a really great conversation, all of us. But um, go ahead, Kyle.
Hey, I'll keep it fast. Thank you for joining. Everything has been incredible. I wanted to kind of on the heels of what Don said earlier about the new environment with social media. I know that it's a big ask and a big pressure from publishers to have a following. I don't have like millions. I have, 100,000 or something like that because of a podcast I produce. But I just want to write. But I know there's a lot of pressure to keep that following growing. What is your perspective on what a social media presence actually means now? And what would you recommend to somebody who wants to write more than they want to keep the social media thing going?
Yeah. I
Burnout.
find it's a really confusing question. Like I don't have a clear answer on it. So really, you do want it's very helpful for publishers to feel that a writer has a platform, right? That's what the big houses, they all want you to have a platform because there are so few ways to connect with readers. And if you have these you can connect with those readers, with those people, then you have a built-in audience. And that's the thought, right? But do those people read? Are those really the people who are going to read this other thing that you're working on? And it's very like we did just publish a book by someone who we thought, oh, he actually is a really good writer and he has a huge social media presence. We publish sometimes in this space. He's a clairvoyant, a medium, and named Travis Hulp. He's really talented, and I was shocked at how good the pages were. Like they just came, and it's a beautiful story about, growing up gay and psychic and having to come out twice, and he went through a huge amount to get to where he is. And we thought, oh, that social media presence is going to show up for this. And he does shows. He goes out. He's on the road all the time. They really don't show up. And it's very disappointing. We're doing another Juliana Glass, who was a Christian pop star who left the evangelical world and now is writing a book called This Is What Happens When Women Read, because that's what her husband had yelled at her when he found a pile of books that were banned from her, and he yelled, "This is what happens when women read." And she left the church. And she has a following. I'm very curious to see will that translate because it's not a given, I don't think. And because what is a given is your connection with those people. And if you can really connect on a level, on a personal level, then it is meaningful, right? And the book that you're writing also talks to people in that way that they come to feel is they know you. I would say, probably keep it up, right? Like, but I don't think I don't think it just depends on what you're writing and what you're saying. And I mean, if you're great on social media, you're probably going to be great, in person and in your events. And yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Very helpful.
Okay.
Cindy, I like to keep these calls to 45 minutes to respect everybody's time. I want to thank you. Before we go, fiction that comes out of Spiegel and Grau is phenomenal. You're familiar with Culpability, Canticle. She mentioned Fire Agent, which is a tome. It looked like a Ken Follett book.
Yeah, Ken Follett. It is.
Um,
It's
and
amazing. Yeah.
it's remarkable. Give us a sneak peek at Freya, because that's a new arena for many of us.
Yeah, Freya is Icelandic noir by a young Icelandic woman who actually grew up in Connecticut, went to the Columbia Writers Program, wrote it in English, and now lives back in Iceland again with her daughter. And it's a thriller. It's a book about a woman living in Iceland who has a daughter. In her childhood, she witnessed possibly the disappearance or murder of a friend of hers, or the drowning of a friend of hers. And there's some mystery because she can't really remember it. And then suddenly a woman appears and is investigating the cold case, and suddenly it becomes very tense. And it's about the mother-daughter relationship. It has a lot of Icelandic folklore in it. It's gripping. It's gotten amazing reads early on. And that's a fun, entertaining book that does touch on some, deeper subject, but it's really fun and a little bit in a genre too, of that noir.
Yeah,
Icelandic noir is what we're calling it.
yeah. This has been
Mhm.
wonderful to see you, to hear from you. Parting words of encouragement to a group of writers.
Yeah, I just find that when you can't not do what you're doing, like when you can't not write, you just have to do it and trust that there's a reason for that. And so I'll just say, just do it, just keep going. And people are always looking for meaning and for things to read and for community. So thank you for coming and listening. And yeah, and sign
Hey,
up for our newsletter.
yes, make sure the delightful thing about a newsletter from Spiegel and Grau is they introduce you not only to their books, but they'll do cute little interviews with staff. So an intern or an editor, sign up. Cindy, again, many thanks, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.
Bye now.
Bye, everyone.
And we will look forward to seeing you in March with our guest, Marilyn McIntyre. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy. Bye now.